Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Kamhi, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
And greetings. Thank you so much for joining me, Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. I'm so happy to have on board with us today our guest, Fay Johnstone. Fay combines 20 years of Reiki practice, and we'll let her tell you what that is, with herbal and shamanic training to connect us with the subtle whispers of nature for personal transformation. Following an awakening to the spirit of plants while running a flower farm in Nova Scotia, Fay was inspired to write her first book, Plants That Speak, Souls That Sing. Transform your life with the spirit of plants, and now offers training and online courses in Reiki, Plant Spirit Connection, and Shamanism online from her home in Scotland. Fay is also the founder of Plant Spirit Reiki, a therapy which connects Reiki healing to the power of plants, as detailed in her new book, Plant Spirit Reiki, which is just newly available. It's Fay's mission to help people find their unique way to connect with the natural world and come into alignment with their own true nature. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure, Ellen. Thank you for having me here. Any opportunity I get to help people connect with plants, to share my passion for plants, is my joy. So thank you.
Well, going back in time, when you were a young girl, is that when you started to realize you had a connection with plants?
Well, it's really interesting that you asked that question, because I always had that. My memory of being a child is running barefoot in the garden and looking for fairies at the bottom of the garden. And I have many memories as a child of picking flowers, and we would pick the flowers and we would squish them up, and there we go. We'd present them to our mums as, hey, I've made you some lovely perfume. And I'm sure my mum wasn't that happy about that either. But I think what happened for me, I had a beautiful childhood living in I grew up in a small village in the counties outside of London. So it was very blissful. There wasn't any public transport. We were quite rural. And I know that many people just don't have an upbringing like that. But for me, it was kind of in my bones, if you like. But as I grew older, I got really out of alignment with that, because there was like the lure of the city and jobs and career and doing all those things, on that kind of success checklist that is kind of drummed into you as you go to school and so on. And actually, I really got out of the habit of being in nature. It became one of those it became like a task to do on a weekend. It's like, hey, I know, on the weekend, let's go for a country walk, which usually ends, in a pub or a restaurant. And it became like sidelined. And it took me a really long time to realize that actually being in nature, connecting with nature was really part of me and needed to be a bigger part of my life. And obviously that's transpired, and it really is. So that's my story, really.
But then now, how did you get back into really having a natural existence as your focus?
I suppose I had that classic meltdown, that turning point that many of us have experienced if we've been in a job that we felt that we needed to do, or I had a realization. It sounds incredibly glamorous. I was in my mid-20s. I was working in a job in Paris, so I had a very glamorous, on the outside, it looks like a very glamorous corporate lifestyle job in the city. And there was one day I had a complete meltdown. I kind of got out of a meeting really late, and all of this stress inside me, it was like something inside me was just shouting and needing to get outside and needing to be heard. And at that point, it was like I had a meltdown really on a busy Parisian street, and you can imagine the looks I got there. But that really, it was my wake-up call. You know, for many people, they have a wake-up call in terms of a health issue that brings them back into kind of, whoa, what am I doing with my life? And for me, it was really the stress that my job was causing me, and not really because it was a stressful job, but because it was really not something that my heart was in, and it wasn't my calling. And it was kind of something I'd fallen into because I thought it was expected of me. I thought this was what success looked like. And so from that point onwards, that was my turning point. And actually, what happened is I started to journal. I started to really connect with myself through kind of journaling and meditation, and also my Reiki practice, self-practice with Reiki, which is a form of hands-on healing and connecting to universal energy. And through this practice, I started to really open up to what was in my heart and to just sort of speak my truth and connect with really what I wanted to do. And I admit this freely, it was unbeknownst to me that it was the plants. For me, I thought that plants was really something that my mum liked, and she liked gardening and flowers and so on. And I hadn't made that connection. I hadn't made that connection that actually as a child, I used to love being outside, running around barefoot. And, you know, there was one particular day I remember because it was a turning point, and I was in a lovely Parisian cafe, and I just kind of had some quiet time with myself, just relaxing. And I was walking home, and a shop caught my eye, and it had a beautiful array of flowers and plants outside. And I tell you, something pulled me into that shop, and I bought as many plants and flowers as I could possibly carry and take back to the apartment with me. And I looked after those until the rest of my time in Paris. And then if you fast forward a year, I tell you, I let those plants into my heart, and fast forward a year, I was no longer working in the city. I would move back to the UK. I was in a small town in the UK. I had a garden. I was learning to forage. I was learning to make herbal medicines. I was growing my own vegetables. I was working for a conservation company, and I was studying for a BSc in herbal medicine. So I'd kind of gone full circle, and the plants were really in my heart, and I was letting them take the lead. And that's
a wonderful story.
That's the beginning of really when I started to go, I need to start listening to this voice inside me that is not happy, that wants to choose another direction. And then you've told my story there in the intro. This kind of, you know, it's almost like it got more out of control. I then found myself moving from the UK to Nova Scotia to run a flower and herb farm. And so, you know, I was really tuning into that intuitive part, my knowing, and I was just really allowing the plants to take the lead and following guidance. And that's really where the story, you know, and that's where my kind of new story starts, is allowing, once we lean in and start listening to our intuition and spending time in nature, this is when we really open up to a very beautiful alignment with the true sense of what it is to be alive and energized by the natural world around us.
Well, that's a wonderful path that you took. And in terms of herbalism, I am one of the council members of the American Herbalist Guild, and we have a training which is called RH, which is Registered Herbalist, that is extremely in-depth and peer-reviewed and recognized here in the United States as someone who can actually do herbal medicine that sometimes the health savings accounts will even cover it. So it's really a focus on herbalism. So what was the degree you mentioned that you have in herbal medicine?
Well, this is my story. I was studying for a degree, a Bachelor of Science at one of the universities. Well, I first started at the Scottish School of Herbal Medicine, which actually doesn't run anymore. But then there's a few universities in the UK that have taken on the qualification, shall we say, in herbal medicine. So I started in my course. Then the college went bankrupt. I mean, this is such a story. And so what happened with me, I ended up stopping my studies. So after 2 years, my studies completely stopped. And it took me a really long time, if you like, to get over that, because I stopped my studies. And this is when we moved to Canada. And I was like, well, that's it. I can't be a clinical herbalist anymore, because like you say, there is so much training to be, you know, it's a very respected, it's like you have to learn everything, all the skills a medical doctor would have. And then you need to learn all these herbs and the interactions and how they affect the body. And you need to get to know the plants. And so that was where my official study, my academic study, came to an end. And that's when actually the spiritual side, the shamanic side of connecting with the plants really opened up for me. But it took me a long while to lean into that. I was very much, you know, I've had a very academic career path, and I thought that kind of the only way to know about herbs and plants is to learn about them at a university or a college and get, like you're saying, a respected qualification. And certainly, if I wanted to say to everyone, yes, I'm a clinical herbalist, come to me and I can help you with your issues and prescribe you some plants and herbs, etc. to take and give you a treatment plan. Yes, we can do that. But I realized, you know what, that isn't my path. Actually, I work with energy because I'm a Reiki practitioner. And through my shamanic connection with spirit and the energy of plants, I connect, you know, it's almost like the information I have comes from the plants. And so I'm not a qualified clinical herbalist, as you would be if you're a member of the American Herbalist Guild. And so I help people connect and find a way to meet plants where they're at and open, if you like, their hearts to the connection that we have with the plant world. So
now, your book is beautiful, and this is a new book called Plant Spirit Reiki. And on the front of the book, it looks like you have a Reiki symbol. Tell us about that and why it's on the front of your book.
Well, the symbol actually on the front of the book is the older kanji of the old Japanese kanji for Reiki, actually. So there's the top kanji, which is for Rei, and then the bottom kanji, which ki. And everyone's familiar with the ki. This is the prana. This is the chi. This is the part that we're familiar with in Western society, the fact that there's energy around us. And the Reiki part, refers to universal, the fact that it's available to everybody. And so what happened for me in my path, through my connection with the plants, you know, when you're running a herbal and a flower farm, I was spending every single moment of that time with plants. So it was like I was spending more time with plants than people. And I really got a sense of how these plants are communicating and talking. And when I was having clients to the farm for a Reiki treatment, for example, I started to open to this possibility that maybe the plants wanted to be in the treatment room with the clients too. And that began, if you like, my personal experimenting and research of bringing plants into a treatment space. And this is what I think this is actually really exciting. You know, we know that studies show that a patient who is in hospital will get better quicker if they have a view of nature outside their window, if they have a window. So we know there's something in this healing capacity that plants have, that the green world has for us. You know, even if we can't explain it yet through science, we know there is something there. You know, I don't need science to tell me that I feel better when I am sitting outside in a beautiful place in nature, or looking out at a beautiful tree, for example, or some flowers. And I started to, you know, like, this is where yes, I'm a Reiki practitioner, and my book is written for people who are energy healers or Reiki practitioners. But most of what I'm saying applies to many practitioners of counselors, social workers, massage therapists, and so on. We can bring elements of the natural world into our treatment spaces. we can have inspirational images of the natural world. If we're in the city center and we can't have a view across, meadows and fields and beautiful forests, we can bring the natural world inside into our homes. So we can have vases of flowers and houseplants. We can diffuse essential oils with aromatherapy and have scents that awaken our emotional, connect with our emotions and awaken our senses. So there are so many different ways that we can kind of weave the natural connection with that green world into our lives and into therapy, into spaces where we are looking to heal and reconnect with the truth of who we are and feel better.
That's a beautiful description. And I want to remind our listeners, you are listening to Herbally Yours. I'm your host, Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse, on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. And you can always send us an email at nccradio.org. You can find our show online at nccradio.org, where it's simulcast, as well as on 90.3 FM. And you also can email us at whpc@ncc.edu or visit my website at naturalnurse.com. Our guest today is Fay Johnstone, and she is the author of this beautiful new book that she's discussing with us that really combines a lot of your loves and interests. It's called Plant Spirit Reiki, and she was discussing with us Reiki healing, which is an ancient art that many people now are learning, and it combines energy healing, and then she brings that in with the elements of nature. It's really a very beautiful book. And what do you mean by practitioners and therapists bringing plants into the healing space? You were describing how you do that, but how would others do that? Do they have to choose specific plants, or will any plants do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are a number of ways that I like to do it with my clients. So sometimes, for example, when I'm out in nature, I might see flowers, or I might see a tree or something which inspires me. And I kind of think, you know what? That feels like it wants to be part of my space today. So I can bring in, for example, at the moment we have fall. The fall colors are amazing. We have beautiful displays of pumpkins and squashes, and just the energy of autumn. We're thinking of these beautiful colors and fruits. And so what I love to do in my space is like have a kind of altar space, which reflects the season. So, for example, that's something that everybody can do. And, you can do this very subtly. If you're working in a very clinical place, you can do it incredibly subtly. You don't have to have a big display or make it a big deal with, crystals and candles and incense and all that kind of stuff, which some people might think, well, that's new age. That's a bit hippie. You can be very subtle about bringing in elements of the natural world, even stones and seashells and things which inspire you, naturally inspired images, like I was saying before, and even, offering somebody a cup of tea while they are connecting with you. If you're having, for example, a coaching session, or if you're seeing a counselor and so on, offering somebody a cup of tea. A cup of tea. Teas are a plant. Coffee is a plant. The spirit of plants speaks to us all in different ways. And there are some times that I will meet a client, and actually I will ask the client to bring in a plant. So if they are I'm wanting to involve my client in the healing, so I will ask the client, take a walk, even if it's on your way to work, and just notice what seems to be calling your attention from the green world. Maybe it's a tree, maybe it's a leaf that the client can bring in. Because what we're trying to do is we're really helping everybody open their hearts to nature. There's really a lot of pain that is caused for us because we think ourselves as separate from nature, and we are not separate from nature. We're an organism on this amazing earth, just like the dogs and the cats and the trees and the birds. We're an organism too, and we've just placed these amazing, beautiful buildings and walls and doors and barriers between us and the green world. But actually, the green world is the source of our strength. It's the source of vitality and energy for us. So the more that we can open to rekindling these connections that our ancestors would have had when they lived in a much more simple way, more closer to the land, then this is the pathway of healing, really understanding kind of who we are and getting, we don't have to get back to nature and leave the city behind, but we can make these really gentle steps towards opening to the green world and bringing ourselves more into alignment with that simplicity of nature. And so
true.
So, there's many different ways that we can open to that. Simply, spending 5 minutes outside, letting the rain soak your skin, letting the wind ruffle your hair, letting the sun warm your skin, connecting with those elements, because we spend so much of our time inside, kind of hiding, if you like, from this wildness that might grow around us.
That's beautiful. And using your consciousness to connect. I do teach a class on communicating with plants. And one thing I really love to point out, it's a beautiful book also called The Hidden Life of Trees and What They Feel, How They Communicate. Are you familiar with that book?
Yes,
Peter Waldman. And
really
one of the things,
yeah.
It's excellent. And he talks a lot about, like you do too, one of the things he talks about that I'm sure you've experienced is the wood wide web. And one of the techniques I use when leading groups on plant communication walks is actually projecting our consciousness into the root of the plant rather than the top of the plant. Because when we think about the physiology, a plant is sort of standing on its head. If you think about the brain being the root system, which it truly is, that's where that communication takes place between plants. And then if we look at the genitals or the reproductive organs of the plant, let's say a flower or a fruit, that's on top. So if we think about our body sort of standing on our head, and I always find that really opens those communication channels more loudly by just projecting our consciousness into the root system. But you're so right that plants are tremendously communicative. If there's a plant that's outside your door, like a tree or a flower, it's an individual. That's another thing I love to focus on. It's not just the plants. Each one is an individual, and they have their own consciousness as we do. It's so wonderful when we can sort of exchange that feeling, like you teach in your book.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think this is where the idea of having a plant ally comes in for people, because this idea of having a plant ally, I think a lot of people when they think about plant medicine, will get very excited about, going on vision quests to Peru or working with shamanic practitioners in very exotic locations. But, you said it yourself. There's a plant that's growing on your doorstep, which is it wants to be your friend. It's an individual. It has personality just like you do. And they're really out there wanting to connect with us. And so if we walk out in nature with a willing heart, the plant on your doorstep will be responding to you, and all plants are communicating all of the time. It really is a case of slowing down to move at the pace of the plant and receive and pause and breathe into this kind of space between you and the plant to make that connection. And that's when we start to bridge that gap and start to understand and open to this magical world of the plant connection and communication and the wisdom that they carry for us, not just in their physiology as a medicinal plant, for example, but also in that in their vibration, in their consciousness that they have.
And you're available online. You're actually speaking to us today from far away because we are sitting here in Long Island and you're somewhere, I believe, in Scotland. Is that correct?
I am. I'm in the beautiful part of Scotland outside Edinburgh, and I'm very fortunate to have my own beautiful old garden, a walled garden to look after with beautiful exotic plants here too. So I'm spending my time making friends with all of them and seeing what they have to say. It's a very busy time to be talking to plants.
But isn't it wonderful, when we think about the challenges we're all having on the planet right now with the pandemic, et cetera, that really there's so many interesting positives from it, such as someone like you're teaching and people can visit you online. So tell us where they can visit you online, because now taking a class in a faraway place online is not such a foreign thought to most people. It's suddenly transformed into a much smaller world.
That's so true. And I think there are many silver linings to what we've all been experiencing. You can find me at fayjohnstone.com. That's where you'll find my website. And I also have another site called Plant Spirit Reiki, which I find all sorts of online courses and programs to get you started on your plant path, whatever that might be. It might be discovering plant allies or learning about plant shamanism. So there's a variety. And I like to say to people, I want you to get to be a confident plant whisperer so that we can communicate and work out how the plants speak to us and what that means for us in our lives. I'm also on at Instagram at Plants That Speak is where you would find me on Instagram.
Plants That Speak.
That's right.
That's a great name. That's wonderful and really reflects the many things that you are teaching. And then, you have various online classes like Plant Spirit Reiki, that people can, it's no further than a click away anymore, which is quite amazing. Not like you'd have to take a plane and go there, although that could be fun too. I hope that your place is open for personal visits at some point in the future.
I hope so too. There's nothing I like more than gathering and connecting and running workshops in the garden, because it's a beautiful experience for everybody. And I've been doing some live workshops, from me and my garden and you and yours is how I call it. So I'll be running too. Yeah.
Oh, that's a nice name. So how does that work?
We meet online through a Zoom chat to start with, and then it's a case of people go off and they do an exercise with a plant, and then we come back and we share on Zoom, and that's how the day flows.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Well, we have to make do because we couldn't get connected. We still can't, where I am at the moment, we're not allowed to visit people in their homes or even in their gardens right now. So we have to make do, don't we? We adapt. And like you say, it's become much easier for people to go, oh, yeah, I can do that online now. So
go outside and bring in the plant, show me yours, you'll show me mine in real time. That's a beautiful thought. So I want to thank you so much for being our guest today, Fay, right here on Herbally Yours. Very appropriate. That's this show, Herbally Yours. And so you're talking so much about plants and your beautiful new book. And there's a wonderful picture of it right on your website. Transform your Reiki practice with the power of plants. Plant Spirit Reiki, bringing those two things together. Healing energy with the elements of nature. And that's Fay Johnstone as a way to remember how to spell it. And of course, your show will be visitable after our airing today online, and people can click right through and find you. So thank you so much for being our guest today.
It's my pleasure. Come and find me online.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning into Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamhi at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.